Before we get started, this episode is sponsored by 𝔟𝔬𝔲𝔢𝔯𝔫𝔬𝔲𝔙. You can check it out at 𝔟𝔬𝔲𝔢𝔫𝔲𝔢𝔫𝔲𝔙.com. Basically, this is my favorite supplement for energy, and I take it whenever I need to lock in. So if you're a founder, student, or new dad like me, you've got to try it. It's got guarana for energy, alpha GPC for memory, and L-theanine to avoid any crashes you're used to with tons of caffeine, energy drinks, or any bullshit like that. It's all natural. It's got no junk. That's why I'm comfortable using it whenever I need to get shit done. Again, try 𝔟𝔬𝔲𝔢𝔯𝔫𝔬𝔲𝔙. Just go to sendnewts.com. That's SENDNOOTS.com. Yeah, let's get back to the episode. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Out of Office. This is episode 6, our second episode with the founder, and we're pretty excited. We have Erik Dunteman here for you. Let me know if I got your last name right.
That is correct.
Perfect. He is the founder of Pig.dev. I don't think too many people know about it, but your SEO is great. If you Google that, it's, I think, the second page.
Already crushing it. You got to choose the right names. You just got to go for
it. Let's start with the company, but we're going to dig into a lot more. So tell us, what is Pig.dev?
Yeah. Pig, it's basically Windows computers for your AI. So full operating systems deployed in the cloud with the interface for your AI to be able to click around, open up applications, do spreadsheet work, answer emails. Basically the personal computer for an AI employee. Yeah, it's pretty sick.
Is that like are you running like a headless operating system there?
Yeah.
It's
so
just like
we're running the operating system in the cloud, and I figured out how to run like a headless remote desktop client session on it that we basically give as a tool to AI agents.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's awesome. I feel like I've heard this before. I haven't seen it like in production. I guess there's a company called WebSim, right, that might do something similar. And then there's Operator that just came out from OpenAI. Can you help us help the audience think through the difference of like those tools and what other things might be out there?
So I can't speak to WebSim because I actually haven't heard of them. I've been heads down building, just blocking out the noise, but Operator, of course, that comes through. So I think the key thing to separate Operator with what we're doing at Pig is Operator is batteries included with the AI. It's basically a full text-to-text interface of like, hey, go perform this task. And then under the hood, they're using a currently browser infrastructure in order to spin up these browsers for an agent to click around and do actions in. Very similar in terms of what we're doing at Pig, but we're not bundling the AI into it. Our customers, our users, are people who are building their own agents, their own automations, and they just need a Windows desktop in order to spin up and do interactions in.
I see. So I imagine there was like, maybe not one moment, but kind of what was the thing that made you like, I have to work on this?
There was actually one exact moment.
Perfect.
And we could get into this, but throughout 2020, I was like banging my head against the wall, trying to figure out my next idea after like shutting down my previous company. And like my head was in the dev tool space. I was coming up with a bunch of ideas, often forcing a bunch of ideas, as Jack probably remembers me coming into Epic with some crazy ideas. But like at the time I was working on the challenge of structured extraction. So how do you take arbitrary text and convert it into, using LLM, convert it into JSON or something that you could feed into like back into a software system. And I was like playing around with that, trying to figure out like how could you build like an automated data entry agent. And I just wasn't really feeling super thrilled by it because I felt all this pressure to build agents and build AI tools. Cause like for me, it's a pretty obvious, like financially lucrative and like worldly impactful thing to be working on. It kind of feels dumb to work on anything else, but I was like forcing it. And then a friend of mine who builds agents called me up and said, hey, I need, and then he describes Pig and said, Erik, you're the exact founder to build this. And like within 20 minutes, I got off the call, thought on it, and they called him back and said, I'm doing it. Like I'm dropping everything else I'm working on. And you were right. Like this is exactly the type of product that I'm great for and that I love. Because it's like at the infra and the platform level, but it's such a critical part of agent infrastructure as well. It just got me super excited to work on it.
And was this friend God, or how did this?
Yeah. Yeah, this was my coming to God moment. No, it's just a friend of mine like that.
That's great.
You build dev tools long enough and you end up seeing people stay in the game for many years. And this guy we did GPT-2 fine tunes for him like back in 2020, before I even met you guys. And yeah, you stay in touch and eventually you build a reputation as being the infra guy and these things come up.
So a request for product that actually worked out.
Exactly. Yeah. it was perfectly aligned on like the sort of things I was thinking about, the sort of things I loved. So like when he brought it up, I was just like, this is it. This is what I'm doing.
Awesome. How much do I mean, you're live like an alpha right now, right? Yeah. And so are there any of the use cases that you can speak to? Just like layman's terms, like customer comes to you, what are they doing and like what are they enabling for their customers?
There's a whole lot of boring legacy applications. So when you think about back office work, far from the tech bubble, there's basically so many tasks like workflows being done that's essentially just copy pasting values from Excel into some niche industry application. The killer use case that's like very obvious is going to take off on Banana are things like electronic health records.
What's Banana? What's Banana, Eric?
Gosh, sorry, I'm still doing that. I've been in customer calls and I slip up. Yeah, so context, Banana was my previous startup, Banana.dev. I'm now doing Pig.dev. I mix them up because they're both incredible names.
Good. Okay.
Okay, sorry. I need to
Yeah.
continue this thread. So Banana, Pig, like how do these names come to you? Are friends telling you about them or do these
No,
just happen?
they just happen. Quite literally, my strategy is looking at domain names, single word domain names, ideally .dev, .ai. And if I see something available at like that, in both the cases with Banana.dev and Pig.dev, literally just available on Namecheap. So it's just like patience is waiting for the right idea. I sat on both of them for like multiple months. Like, do I do it? Do I go for it? And in both cases, I'm super glad that I did.
Nice. Is there
It's really brandability. You also need an emoji pre-built for your brand. I think that's incredibly important.
So we met you on Banana. Is there like a further history or does it start with Banana?
No. So do you want the brand history or like my founder
Just
history?
kind of more out there names and the companies associated with them.
So before Banana, the company was called Boost, Booste.
Yeah.
And the whole idea was like boost your applications. Because ironically, I was actually building remote desktops for running desktop applications back in like 2018, 2019, before I got into what we did at Banana. But yeah, when I saw that domain name available, I just pivoted the company brand and we were Banana and, Boost went out the wayside.
Okay. And so back to what you're talking about.
Yes.
Automating legacy are you talking about like, going to old government websites, clicking through them or some legacy other software that a law firm might use? Is that kind of what we're talking about?
Law firms are locked onto specific applications. There's not just one, there's like very many insurance claims, electronic health records, like Epic, the sort of things you see in hospitals. Like all of these applications are desktop only and they don't offer a public API. And it's not like the tech hasn't existed to transition these applications to the browser or to the cloud. It's just like there's so much human systems lock-in that's keeping these like SMBs and enterprises using these old applications. And that's a lot of that we're making with Pig is that AI is going to advance faster than like human organizational systems can advance. So let's just use the platform that we're locked in on and just automate it.
Awesome. I kind of want to give you a chance to like give your own request for product, like for people using Pig. Is there some industry or some slate of software that needs to be automated that some founder listening to this should go build and use Pig as a backend?
I could just say over and over, healthcare and insurance seem, not because I necessarily want to see jobs automated out of that space, but there's so much menial, like literally for the sake of compliance, copy and pasting data across applications that takes valuable time from valuable people. So I'd love to see applications like that built. I think someone building on Pig has like the opportunity to make a lot of money there. And then of course, Pig has the opportunity to support you.
Even digging to that further, I'm thinking like in a lot of these fields, software has to be regulated, approved, etc. And that's probably why you have a lot of this crap software, I'd have to assume.
Yeah.
And then why update it? Because you don't want to go through that pain again and it gets the job done. If one of your customers automates it, but they are using said software on Windows, technically, are they maybe in the free and clear? Or, so I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I've
had some users throw around the phrase illicit API because they're basically like, we want to automate the software for whatever reason. They're not exposing an API for automation. So like literally clicking around is the way to get the job done. And you can do that with traditional RPA scripts like click here, key enter here, and like AI is making that more flexible now. But I say illicit because perhaps there are reasons that these applications are preventing programmatic automation. I'd say more often than not, there's not reasons. There's just more like human systems and like red tape involved. And it's not necessarily against what the software wants, but if you're building on Pig, you need to be well aware of why the applications you're automating maybe don't have an API and decide your risk tolerance considering that. Though on our end, like as the platform provider, we just hope that everyone acts within the bounds of what's correct.
I mean, you're just a platform. That's my favorite
Exactly. Yeah.
thing to say.
Yeah, yeah.
Just a platform. What do you
Yeah,
want me to
just
do?
a platform. Yeah. Don't do anything illegal on us.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do
just a platform.
think, I mean, I do think legally, obviously, you can say you're a platform and step aside from a lot of these issues. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, if some of your customers are making a ton of money using your platform, I'm sure they're going to run into this stuff, and you're going to have to take some opinion or some risk based on the fact that they might do stuff that they won't be able to do in a year from now or 2 years from now.
Mhm.
Because maybe you're the first tool, like, right? Like this is
Yeah,
the first
yeah.
time the automation
Right.
comes in, and so they don't have time to react, but eventually these end targets might react. I don't know how much time you spend thinking about that, or it's kind of like just kicking the can down the road.
Kick in the can. So
Yeah.
I've thought about it. I know it's coming.
Yeah.
And obviously it's something we need to take seriously. Like we care about our longevity as a company as well. But it is the sort of thing that just like the human systems that are locking these applications onto the platform, there's also human systems preventing legislation and regulation around these sort of things. So I think there's going to be a period of time similar to crypto where it's kind of a gray area. Nobody really knows how to treat the technology. Say you have an AI that can get around CAPTCHAs. What does that actually mean? And once there's actually tangible legislation around that, then we'll start thinking about how to support our customers.
And so I always hear this theory of, one day like UI and UX that we know of today is all going to go away, right? Because agents are going to automate everything. And there are, maybe that's going to happen. I mean, probably, maybe it's like the movie Her, I don't know, just an AGI that can do everything for you. Do you think that means everything is going to get restructured so that an AI can use it? Or does it just, no, like we'll just use Pig. Actually, don't do anything. Everyone use Pig or something like it. And now the agents can just do everything we already do in the world. Or like I kind of see, or do you see them converging? I'm just curious what you think about that.
I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and this was part of when I was coming up with ideas within the agent space. I was mostly doomer because like the obvious end game for super intelligence is it could on the fly generate whatever integration it wants in code and then just run that. Though I think we have so much time before we get to that point where the on the fly code generation is perfect to the extent that you're willing to trust it. So in the meantime, we need to go through already trusted mediums in order to execute those workflows. And those mediums are APIs that are exposed, which is a great way to integrate, and literally clicking through UIs that have been used by humans for decades. I would put like at least a 5-year timeline before we can possibly get to the world where software as a concept and as like a value creating thing changes that dramatically. And in the meantime, like we just choose the interfaces that have the highest reliability. And I think human interfaces are probably the best way to do that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And 5 is short. I mean, it's kind of interesting to see the timelines come down. People always say like, oh, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, everything will change. But now it's like 5, 2, 3.
Yeah. Well, it also like depends on the level of complexity and the amount of APIs that are exposed. Like in the end, the success of an integration comes down to what percentage of it is written in code that is tested. So like, if you're hitting an API, so much of that call chain is still hard-coded software. If you're generating integrations on the fly, then you have a smaller percentage that's untested. But I think within 5 years, like there'll be access to either controlling these computers or calling into APIs that like, for the most part, you can get whatever task you need done.
And tell me, are your customers going to be the hospitals, the investment banks? Are you hoping people come along and essentially build a wrapper on top of Pig for each of those use cases?
Ideally, there's a middleman because I feel like, so again, Pig isn't necessarily doing any of the AI level stuff like memory management, planning, like actually executing the tool calls. We're just the vehicle through which you could perform that on an application. So ideally, the best target user is, call it a vertical agent company, somebody who's building automations for a very specific niche. Perhaps they're consultants, perhaps they could be, like the nerdy tech team inside of Home Depot who just like, let's let's experiment around with this technology and bring it into the organization. But ultimately, the means by which I want to deliver Pig is as a developer platform for AI teams rather than delivering the AI out.
Yeah. Okay. Makes total sense. Very nice. And are you doing this thing alone, or you got a co-founder?
Yeah. Yeah. Starting solo.
Wow.
Do you guys have thoughts on that? Like, what's your take on the solo founder move?
I had a hybrid solo. So my brother and I started Gabber together, but he was working. So I did a lot of the day-to-day. It was kind of like two co-founders worth of work, one co-founder. I will say it got a lot easier when he went full-time. Going solo can be tough because I was doing a lot of the engineering and then also going to market. You have to almost compartmentalize your day.
Yeah.
It's possible, especially early, when you're ramping things up, you're the sole driver of the vision. But at some point, I do feel like having another voice in the room and being able to focus on one core part of the business, whether it's sales or whether it's building, can be helpful. But early on, I actually prefer it. I think you can, as long as you have trusted friends you can bounce ideas off of, I think you can really, you can move faster alone kind of thing. But eventually you go further together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm currently in the move fast alone phase of things, like the ability to just keep all the context in your head and just like go execute on it. The context shifts are very difficult. For example, I jump in a podcast today, probably not going to be coding much, but I think if you split it out day by day or, block off my evenings, I'm generally coding. That's a good time to like get work done. I think it works, but certainly it's nice to have help. Once it's clear what the vision is and you just need to go out and execute on it, it's really nice.
And tell me, you're a previous founder. I know burnout is a thing. Burnout is a thing I dealt with. The last 3 or 4 months were pretty brutal, but now, I'm on the other side of it. Do you worry about that? Do you think about that? Or is it, I have my thoughts, but I'm curious, do you just go until you'll see what happens and figure it out?
Yeah, I think a trigger for burnout it's different for every different person. So I'm just going to speak from my experience. But on the backside of shutting down the previous company, Banana, I had a pretty horrible burnout to get over, multifaceted as well, like 2 very different reasons why I was burnt out. But in the end, it really boiled down to honesty with myself around what I actually liked, what I wanted to do, and why I was doing it. So at the time, it was because I was so tied to making the first startup of my career work. And there's a lot of this narrative around young founders moving to San Francisco, sleeping on their floor mattresses and like just cranking their life into their startup and basically becoming martyrs to it. And, I fell victim to that. And now coming into the next one, I think the quantity of work will remain the same, if not more. Like, I don't think overworking was necessarily the problem, but it's just the level-headed mentality of, this could totally fail. Microsoft could totally launch hosted desktop environments for AI, and then we'll have to figure out the next thing. And just like being fine with that and trusting my own skills as a founder to navigate that is like, that's what brings me a lot of peace going into this next one.
I love it, man. No, I felt the same thing. I think it's easy to do long days when you feel that it's okay if you fail.
Yeah.
Having a gun to your head, it's just hard to do anything when you have a gun to your head.
Yeah. And the weird thing is like you're holding the gun against your own head. It's often self-imposed.
Sure. And then when you know what you're working on, what opportunity costs are out there, and you've essentially come to terms with that. It's because burnout, a lot of it is mental, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And on the topic of opportunity costs, like another helpful thing is just to never think about that. Like just, I don't know, like, or maybe on the flip side, I have the opportunity to work on my own thing and to try to like, just get in the arena and do that whole thing. And like that's an opportunity. There's a value in that you simply don't have with other things. When you think about opportunity costs, like that's the hidden reverse factor that's in your favor.
100%.
Yeah, opportunity costs can be really dangerous, to focus on. I think within your business plan, like it's fine. Like, once you get to a certain size, it's something your CFO should think about. But I think in your personal life, it can be really dangerous, or even with money.
Yeah.
If you ever sit and think about your money too obsessively, especially if you have nothing else to do, you're like, okay, do I just put in Vanguard? Real estate sounds really fun, but then, you get to the percentage, oh, it's lower than that. Wait a second. Bitcoin for the past 10 years is better than everything else. And then you get to this, now you're the guy who sells everything and buys Bitcoin and doesn't own a house or a car or pants. And so I think that can be extrapolated beyond money. I think it can be really dangerous in your personal life. Like you have to do something outside of just opportunity cost because there's so much out there.
I think you need to throw opportunity costs out the window and just think about like, what brings me joy? What type of work brings me joy? And for me, building a developer platform, weirdly enough, like is super fun for me. So like whatever the opportunity cost is, like there is no cost. I just enjoy doing exactly this. So like having the compass be what brings you joy is a much simpler calculus to make when you're trying to decide priorities.
Yeah, for sure. Wait, Eric, do you have employees right now, or is this just solo?
No, I'm like literally solo, just me.
That's
when
awesome.
I'm in meetings, like companies not moving forward. When I'm coding, I can't take meetings. So it is a balance, but I'm planning on keeping like just me for probably 2 months, if not more, before I think it's hiring.
How far is it? Like when do you say you like officially started? Like how long has it been?
First line of code was December 11th, 2024. So I'm a bit more than a month into it.
Okay, amazing. And so you're just focused all on the product. You're not thinking about hiring anyone or raising or anything like that.
Just like put it in the user's hands and then they say like, hey, this is broken or this would be nice. And I go fix that. And it's like, just kind of keep that simplicity. And once I feel like we're dialed in, or honestly, once I feel like there is a very clear line of work to someone, for someone to come in and help out with, then it's probably a sign to go out and hire.
Yep, for sure. And I guess, it kind of like plays into this big narrative, like, oh my God, everyone using AI tools can just do everything on their own. Is that a big factor for you? Or
I've been using it a lot. I mean, I would love to say that I'm just cracked. I'm able to like crank out insane amounts of code. But Claude has been my best friend throughout all this, especially with like the virtualization and the lower level, like screen capture sort of work. That's been really nice, like work with AI on. I am a bit skeptical on like the full cross-file code editors like Cursor. I haven't really had much success with that, but using AI as a mentor or like a teacher, a tutor, where I could go and like, I need to understand this concept as quickly as possible. And I could go and riff with a model, like deeply understand it, maybe see some code examples. And then now that I've internalized that, go and just like manually implement it, or maybe do some tab completions with like one of the autocomplete tools. But using it primarily for understanding has been incredibly helpful. I feel like the progress or the product takes a step back when I go full hands off the wheel and I just let these code editors regress my entire application, which has happened a few times. So I'm like, I kind of lost faith in that. Yeah. What do you guys think?
Now, I've been banned from using Cursor by my brother / CTO because it'll just go for it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it has a mind of its own completely.
Uh-huh.
I'll say, if you have somebody good in the driver's seat, it can be a good tool to get you where you're going. It's essentially, I'll call it a map. It can help you route where you're going. But if you give it the wheel, you're probably going off a cliff pretty soon.
Yeah.
I think Cursor is fun. Like when you're doing just like an MVP, you're just like playing around and you want to like try something new and you don't want to waste the time of like programming, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It can be super useful, but I do imagine like if you want to take that to production, you're going to scrap most of it, or maybe not, but I could definitely see that distinction.
And I've been amazed as well. Like when AI generates my code, I'm so much more willing to scrap that code in the future with like complete rewrites by that AI. So the turnover is massive. And I feel like I'm not thinking for future me when I'm committing significantly AI generated code.
And so are you mostly using Claude then to kind of like ideate, learn things, kind of walk through a different way you might do something? Or are you also just using it for small, like annoying code things as well?
No, example from today is like the way I've implemented streaming the remote desktop screen to a client. I'm not entirely happy with. It's a bit slower than I'd want. So I go into Claude and I'm just like, hey, like, tell me about video streaming. Tell me everything involved with it. What are the tools? How are people thinking about this? If I want a single producer and multiple subscribers watching the screen, how does that work out? How do I make it if there are no subscribers watching the stream? And like you kind of riff back and forth and basically understand the existing tools, how people set them up architecturally. And then once that's understood, I'll go up, look up some documentation to actually do it. But this morning was thinking about that sort of things, generally more higher level understanding concepts and kind of, as a, without a co-founder, especially like just riffing, basically whiteboarding. And then once you have the implementation, it's easy to go out and do it.
Yeah, I can find it to be really powerful. I don't know. Did you see the kid that made like the fusion reactor or whatever on
Yeah.
Twitter and said he had no hardware experience and, didn't like know what an atom was before he started?
Yeah. I've had a very similar experience like that where I dump as much documentation or context into it, either through cloud projects or directly into the chat. And then I just ask questions and get quizzed by the model until I feel like I understood it and could repeat the concepts back.
Yeah. What is your monthly spend on AI tools? Maybe outside of the company.
Yeah.
Like if it's very company specific, I guess it doesn't.
Yeah. So like probably $50 a month. I have a cloud subscription. I have Super Maven, which I guess is now part of Cursor. I've been trying out Windsurf recently as well. So those combined, probably $50. I'm not on the $200 subscription that a lot of people say is very worth it, but I'm not that AI pilled yet.
What is Windsurf?
Windsurf, it's Cursor, but different company.
Okay.
It's one of the Cursor competitors. It's quite good. I think they don't get enough love.
Interesting. But what do you use that for? I thought you said you don't use Cursor because you don't like it doing multi-file edits. So I'm curious.
I use that for like big refactoring jobs, but never new implementation stuff.
Okay. This kind of like reminds me, like, we're thinking about how much code basically are you comfortable with something generating? And it feels like for you, it's pretty low, unless it's like a refactor, like, core stuff, you really want to understand it and write it yourself.
Yeah.
And recently I saw you.
The favorite interface by a large margin is tab complete. Because like maybe I'll get one line of code out of it, but I'm still steering.
Yeah, for sure.
But where are you heading with that? I was curious.
No worries. I saw you post one of PG's essays about kind of rights versus right-nots.
Yeah.
It made me really think about this because, like, obviously there's an old guard of programmers that just make fun of new programmers or people who use Claude. Then again, here I'm talking to someone who's using a lot of AI, building a real company, and is a good programmer. And so it is kind of interesting because you're at that place. It's impossible for you to imagine never have learning programming and just doing it for the first time with AI. I imagine it would be fine, but obviously maybe I'm biased or like I just think I'm happy with all new technology seemingly. Mm-hmm. So do you think like coming up with all these tools is going to be detrimental to like learning any fundamentals of software engineering or not really?
I don't know. Or I do know, but I try to check myself. I don't want to be the classic, like back in my day, we had to learn how to write Python. Like, for sure. That is going to be an archetype in the future and it's going to be insufferable. And I don't think it's like a productive mentality to have. That said, I personally appreciate the fact that I know how it works under the hood, not like to necessarily pick up on errors and fix them, but just like there's a phrase, the Prime Engine repeats a lot. I forget if it's originally from him, but like nothing feels better than competency. Like when you are building something, perhaps if the end goal is like to simply ship the thing and like get it out there, sure, you could like do it entirely through AI. But like part of the joy, and this is what I was referring to earlier about, I just find joy in building dev infrastructure. A part of the joy is the competency, like the understanding that like I knew exactly what I was doing the entire way through this. And now I see it working. And that's like justification of how smart I am. And that's sick. Like that's something that I appreciate. And when I write things fully with AI, I don't get that, like that sense of accomplishment having built the thing. And this links a lot back into the rights and rights not of the Paul Graham essay is like when you're going through the process of learning how to write really well, it forces a level of understanding that you're not really required to hit if you're like just using models. Again, like the end result could be the same, but like the journey, the understanding that you've built along the way, you can completely coast on LLMs and not understand the things. And again, it gets the job done, but it's not the part that brings me joy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, because for you actually enjoy doing it, whereas for a lot of people, it might just be a means to an end, and then maybe it doesn't matter if it gets done.
Well, I mean, I could definitely resonate when I'm writing front end. 100% means to end. I just want to get that. I want to get it done. But like when I'm thinking about the back end of the product and the like actual developer interface, the API, the SDK, like I want to understand it. I want to be a part of it because that is the act of creation that I'm finding joy in.
Yep, for sure. And hey, Jack, if you haven't read this essay, basically the gist of it is, PG is saying now that you can, use AI to generate text, right? You'll see like email generation, proofreading, rewriting, all this auto suggestions, kind of stuff like that. That, there's no longer going to be like good writers, okay writers, and bad writers. There's just going to be people who can write really well and people who can't write at all. Because why would you write basic text anymore going forward? And then he extrapolates that to say, I'm sure you've heard this, that, people, you retain memory better and learn better when you're actually writing. Some people say writing on paper. Some people like me would say it's fine if you're typing it. That's a different battle. But basically, that when you're doing the writing, that's when you're learning. And so if you're not writing anymore, you're not learning. And then says it's a battle between the thinks and think nots, because you're not thinking anymore if you're not writing.
I agree with the second point. I think the writing, so for example, I went to a high school where they drilled it into our head for 4 years how to write an essay. I graduated, I got like a C+ on every essay I ever wrote. And then fast forward, I've done a lot of reading. I've developed my own writing style, and people compliment me all the time on my writing. So it's interesting. A lot of it, I think, is maybe it's not so much the process of doing the thing, but it's thinking about the thing. So, for example, when I write code with a cursor, if I ship something, not only is there no joy in it, but I don't really know how it works when cursor does the whole thing. Versus when I have to hop in and actually learn the steps along the way. Even if I didn't write most of the code, if I have to debug something and actually read through all the code and internalize it, I get better in the process. So there may be a hybrid there where it's really the thinking versus not thinking. And then downstream of that is the writing versus not writing. That's how I think about it.
I think regardless if you're actually the one doing the writing, it's very important to not skip the thinking step.
Exactly.
And that was the big takeaway that I had that like really resonated with me in the Paul Graham essay is it's going to be increasingly easy to not think. And that's not a future that I personally want for myself.
Definitely agree.
Have either of you had this experience kind of, maybe it's when you're writing or programming. For me, it's when I'm talking. I feel like sometimes when I get into a deep conversation with a friend or talking about some kind of business or something like that, I tend to have a lot of my best ideas just during the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Does that happen to you guys?
I've seen it happen to other people. Honestly, it's not how my mind works. I just got it. It's already in there.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I'll go for it.
In my case, I'll often find better vocabulary in order to present what I'm already thinking. Oftentimes I don't think in an internal monologue. I just kind of have nebulous thoughts and emotions floating around my head. And they're like structurally already like in the place that they should be. So through talking with someone, I figure out the vocabulary required to express that. And like that aha moment is like, once I nail in the vocabulary, it's cool. I can now effectively communicate this to other people as well. Though I wouldn't say I've necessarily had like the experience that you're talking about where riffing on things really helps you understanding. I think experimenting with things and like developing new experiences is super helpful for me, though not necessarily just talking. I'm curious, Jack, you had your own thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, that's great because I think about, for example, there was maybe 3-4 weeks ago, I was at Karthik's place. I was picking up my mic, which is not working, and now I'm on my AirPods. And we were talking, and I felt like we had a really good conversation about like the state of San Francisco, and I made a lot of good points. And then we recorded an episode like later that day or something, and I felt like I'd never spoken before, like just like truly like an imbecile. To me, I think it's context dependent. Like if I'm with someone and I'm comfortable with them, and I don't know if it's the stakes are low or it's some switch in my in my brain, I feel like I do come up with really good ideas when I'm truly playing like practicing tennis. But when it's time, comes time for the match, I just I shit the bed. So sometimes it's best to do the shadow boxing,
Does this happen to you in general with podcasting? Because I always find myself being a bit performative in podcasts, which is like, it doesn't necessarily help the conversation, but you guys have been doing this for a bit longer. So
it certainly, I think it does. I think it happens. It's actually, and I was listening to, I'm going to take a tangent, I'll bring it back. I think it's Jordan Peterson's new book. It's like Analysis of the Bible. It's really, really interesting book. And he talks about when you're when you're serving yourself, so essentially you're putting yourself and like furthering your reputation at the forefront, you end up putting way more of your brain power towards that than to the thing you're actually doing. This is why, really, really brilliant speakers who are experts in their field can get on a stage and just totally blow it. It's because they're so worried about how people perceive them and the status they're going to gain or lose that they don't just, go to work. I think that's where a lot of it comes from. Is like, oh, I'm putting myself out into the world, or if I'm talking to an investor who I want money from, it's so different than when I'm talking to a buddy. Me and you can talk about shotgun and beers and your next company.
I was going to bring up the shotgunning story.
Yeah,
you and I have seen each other in less casual environments.
Exactly.
Casual, yeah.
Precisely. And then, but if you were to put a camera there, like, it would be different. It would just be different.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a tangent there, but I truly believe it's context dependent for me. Like, I do my best work when I'm with a homie and can just let it rip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like a censorship part of it then, right?
I think there must be. And I don't know, maybe with I'm just going to get political for half a second. With the new administration, maybe I can stop censoring myself so much, but I don't know. And I don't actually mean that sarcastic, but
for the record, Jack has said I'm going to get political for a second on every episode, and you should just feel free to do that. We don't need the warning anymore. We're probably already blocked on YouTube.
Still testing the waters. Like, can I do this?
I haven't gotten canceled yet, even though I'm my own boss. I think that's why I do this, so I can. One day I will let it fly.
Do you think it's more a factor of maybe that's more like stage fright or being camera shy or something? Which I wouldn't say you are, but
that's what's interesting. I will be an idiot on camera, but I can't be authentic. That's the like weird thing. Like, I feel like there's like
idiotic. You're actually like super genius and like really smart and level-headed in person.
Okay, we don't have to start lying to the viewers. So yes, totally took us off track there, but I feel like it's context dependent.
Yeah, it's funny that the thing I was just talking about, like, we're just 6 episodes in, it hasn't been that much. Jack's been posting stuff, I think short form stuff for a long time. It's funny for me when people hear this or other YouTube stuff I'm on, they're like, oh my God, you're such a good public speaker. I couldn't imagine doing that and sharing this with the world, especially long form. They're like 30 seconds, you do a dance, whatever. But people can listen to this forever. And I said, for me, I actually sometimes just get that heart rate warning on my watch. I don't notice. So it's almost like I just ignore it. Like, there's definitely a time where I was very uncomfortable speaking in public. And I don't know. I don't have a tip here, but fuck it. Just if you want to do it, just do it.
The tip is like knowing to expect it and just becoming comfortable with it. Like, I talk about this all the time. I come from Chicago. It can be pretty cold in the winter. And like, if you're not accustomed to it and you get there, you can complain about the cold. And the internalization of it is like never, oh, you just get used to the cold. It is, you get used to feeling cold. And I think there's a difference there. Like, you just accept.
For sure.
Like, this is going to suck. Like, part of it.
And is it worthwhile? This is a stupid idea I've been entertaining on my walk back from the gym. Is it worth it to purposely be a little bit unhinged because maybe that gets me closer to normal? Or is that just like the worst idea in the entire world?
Can you define like an example?
Yeah, like, okay, here, I'm being careful with what I say, even though I always get political, kind of. Is it worth purposely making an ass of myself, and then maybe I meet in the middle and I'm actually just authentic? Or is that inauthentic to purposely make an ass of myself,
It depends on what your goals are. Like, do you feel like you're suppressing certain parts about yourself and you like need to get uncomfortable with that, like basically exposure therapy to it? Or like, are you just going to make an ass out of yourself for no reason at all?
No, and that's a really good point. These are things I need to meditate on.
Do you have
more
walls
fodder for the gym walks?
Yeah.
I think I do. Okay. Well, I've sufficiently tangented us to a new direction. We don't have to keep giving me therapy. Erik, I'm actually really curious. So sort of similar. Your comeuppance as a founder, what was that journey like? I think we came up at a similar time, in very different directions. We ended up in a similar place. I'd love to hear about it.
So I guess I'll start from the very beginning. As a young lad, I grew up on a farm in the Midwest, and the family always raised me to be very intellectual. Like, I care about school. When I wanted to go to school for engineering, they were nothing but supportive, despite the fact that the farm needs someone to run it. Like, go off, be a mechanical engineer. Got the support to do that. During college, I developed a chip on my shoulder where I realized kind of the following the how do I phrase this? Oftentimes people end up in sort of autopilot mode, and the world tells you, here's what you're supposed to do. And in my case, it was like, oh, you got good enough grades in math and science in high school, so you should probably go into engineering. I'm like, well, I guess I need to go into engineering. Thankfully, like, the engineering side of things worked out for me, but that applies across many parts of life, including like, where I chose to go to college, the hobbies I chose to take up. I really hadn't stopped and questioned myself, really challenged why am I doing this, other than, well, inertia brought me to this point. Like, I was previously moving in this direction, so I continue moving generally in this direction. So when I was about maybe 20 years old, I had a spring semester where I was just pretty depressed, really not happy with myself, not thrilled where things were going. This was my sophomore year of college. And I just wasn't proud of myself as a person, wasn't happy, wasn't fit, wasn't dating well, just all around. So my friends basically asked me yo, why you seem really sad? Why aren't you changing things? And that was my trigger to start changing things. And that was probably the biggest switch that's ever flipped in my brain. The idea of, oh, you could change direction. You could just do something different. For me at the time, it was getting my fitness in line. I was previously pretty not fit as a person. And then that summer, a friend of mine started training together, and I ended up going basically couch to marathon over the span of that summer. I lost 55 pounds in the process.
Amazing.
And that was just oh, holy shit. You could just decide to do things. You could decide to change things. And if you follow the plan, it works. And that was incredible. Running as a personal challenge is a recurring theme throughout my career. Even up to this year, I ran a pretty big race that I'm really proud of. But that got me into that mode. So every year I would, do a bigger and bigger race. I would do something more and more outside of my comfort zone. Exposure therapy, really trying to choosing the direction I wanted to be, which in my mind was basically, I want to summit Everest. So I want to be fit, but I also need enough money in order to summit Everest, because that's super expensive. So I got to start building companies. I got to start being a digital entrepreneur. And we can step back and say some of that was misguided, because that was the idea of what success and all that was from the eyes of an undergrad in Iowa State University. But I started doing the digital influencer stuff. I started learning how to code, because everyone got to make an app to make their first money. And through that, I actually did discover I like coding. I actually just love coding. This is super fun. So by the time I graduated undergrad, I was full-time convinced I would be building my own startups. So I moved to Silicon Valley. This would have been spring of 2019, and it was full-time on startups since, all the way through up until Banana. We had to close doors early 2020. I was briefly employed, so unfortunately I don't have a perfect nonstop stretch of being a full-time founder. But for 5 years straight out undergrad, I just figured out how to make ends meet and stay full-time on my startup projects, which became increasingly more and more of the style that you see out here: venture-backed, high ambition, less about drop shipping and more about building developer platforms.
Very nice. Very nice. And that process when you were working, I had a stint where I was working as well. I felt like it was nice to make some money, to take a breather. Was that why you did it? Am I making this too philosophical and you just needed a job? Tell us about that.
I needed to pay bills. So I'm here in San Francisco. I support my wife full time. So bills had to be paid. It was a very different experience than when I first moved out here, and I could be super scrappy and sleep on someone's couch. But also part of it too is I was tired of the pressure of making the next thing happen immediately. I think, I was talking earlier about how young founders kind of go through this mania. You need to dump everything into your startup. And I know Forbes 30 under 30 is no longer a cool thing anymore. But that concept of the younger you are and the more successful you are, the better. And I wanted to stop putting a deadline or that level of urgency on my own success. So following shutting down the previous company, I tried to just relax and chill and take some time, do some travel to heal, and that wasn't enough. But the moment I just got a job, knowing that I'd indefinitely be at that job, that's when like everything got better, because it's like, cool, I've like thrown off the chains of expecting any sort of timeline. I'll be here as long as I feel it's worth it, as long as I feel like I'm having fun, making enough money. And I had a great time. I worked at 𝔟𝔲𝔯𝔫𝔬𝔲𝔫𝔬𝔲𝔫 former competitor of Banana. They rock, super good team. I got to see what good hiring looks like. I got to see what good management and founders look like. And just overall, really, really positive experience doing that. So
It's liberating to just decide maybe I am just going to be a loser for a little bit or forever. And I might not pan out. And that was like when I got my job after shutting my company down, and I could just learn things, and whatever happened, I was making money and I could have hobbies again. And like, oh wow, I can be happy doing this. And that was actually why I felt okay starting the next thing, because it's like, oh, this plan B is pretty great over here. So we can try plan A again, and I'll just go back to being happy if plan A doesn't work out.
How long was that period for both of you?
Jack, you go first.
Yeah, for me, voice crack. For me, I think it was probably about a year. One, I had the exact same experience as Erik. I put all my self-esteem in being successful via startup. I went to a high school where almost like all these people I went to middle school with went to Harvard and Princeton. And like I ended up just kind of a failure to launch, going to a pretty mediocre school. But I always had a high horsepower. I just couldn't like learn how to drive the car. And I really got a grip, I would say, during my master's, and was able to put things together. But to me, I hadn't fully arrived until I had become a millionaire, which is insane. That is insane behavior. But that was my mindset. And when my brother and I had been building companies after work for a number of years, and then a shared investor of all of ours invested in us. And that was really the start of, okay, here we go. And that was like the hardest 2 years of our life, because we chose the wrong idea, and it was an uphill battle the whole time. And when it shut down, it was like, okay, who am I? What am I doing here?
And the weird thing is, like, you spent enough time on it that you emerge out of the backside, like as an adult, basically.
100%, man.
It's crazy. You gotta answer questions that you just had been putting off previously.
Exactly. Who am I? What makes me happy? Okay, this North Star of mine turned out to be like a smudge on the screen I was looking through, and it actually didn't exist. Or maybe it did, and I just don't have the rocket fuel to get there. So there's a big revamp period for me. And I tell this analogy of these radiographs where it's, there's 5 or 6 different things, and it's kind of like a spider or whatever. For me, there was a piece that had been fully underdeveloped, this is going to be a tangent, but the music stuff. I'd always wanted to make music, and I'd been writing music, but all these other parts of my life I had been growing, but this thing was at like 0 still. And I felt like everything else couldn't grow anymore until I at least gave it a shot. I publicly came out as a musician, which is like a ridiculous statement, but I was so scared of putting myself out there. And so that year, not only did I rebuild financially, I actually like learned how to date properly. And like the defining moments we shut down the company, I had really severe alopecia. So I was like scared of what I looked like, because I lost my hair really quickly, and I was wearing hats every day. And I went on a date with this girl I really liked, and she basically called me a pussy. And I was like, oh my God, like this is not happening. And then I went out with Karthik and his past co-founder, and I went to a bar where they made you wear a hat. You couldn't wear a hat, sorry. Bar where you couldn't wear a hat. And I'm wearing a hat, and I went home. And I was like, oh, that's not going to work. Like, you're not a guy who lets the world dictate that you go home at night. Like, that is not who you are. And so this whole thing catalyzed into me needing to revamp. So I started the rock band. I stopped wearing hats. Like, I can't wear a hat anymore unless it's a cowboy hat without feeling uncomfortable. And I spent a year just figuring everything out and like really starting from 0. And by the end of that year, I felt like, okay, I know who I am. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've always started little projects. I always had Minecraft channels or tried to start little websites or stores or whatever. And by the end of that year, I was like, okay, I'm back to who I am. I knew who I was when I was 12. And now it's just time for me to act on that as a 30-year-old. So really, it's like, I'm just doing all the things 12-year-old me wanted to do. And that was the process. It was a year of getting back to my roots.
Yeah. but then you rediscovered your roots and ended up back in the same situation, which like I'm in the same situation as well, but like, why did you end up back in building 𝔟𝔬𝔲𝔫𝔬𝔲𝔫𝔬𝔲𝔫𝔬𝔲𝔬
Yeah, I think I love entrepreneurship. I don't care that it might not work out. Like it's just purely fun. It's cool to go from zero to having customers paying you money and creating value in the world and like potentially employing people. And it's not I don't even want to tell people about it. Like it's when people ask me what I do, I say I do startup stuff. I'm in, San Francisco. I don't say like I'm working on a company, I'm going to take over the world. It's really just, I like it. It's fun. And same with the music. It's like people ask me, oh, do you want to like, I used to want to be a rock star. And now it's like, I just like making rock and roll, man. And there's nothing cooler than that. Right. So, that is how I ended up back here. It's really just a mindset fit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the maturity that you and I have both found is really around like, there's a certain amount that is in your control on the success of these things. So there's a certain amount that's out of your control, and just being really frank with yourself about that and still putting in your best effort and like having fun along the way, because having fun maximizes outcomes as well. But what happens. Like there's just being a bit more sober about that makes the entire process so much more enjoyable.
100%. And Erik, similar experience. Tell us about yours.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was just first startup was I need this to succeed because I've had a 5-year run at this full time. And I've seen the post about like, look at this founder, he never gave up. And it's just like back to back LinkedIn, like founder. Shit, I gotta be that. And then once you finally cast that away and you're like, I was employed somewhere for like 6 months. I shut the thing down. I took a 3-month sabbatical. I was employed for about 6 months. And then by the end of that 6 months, I'm like, shit, I'm ready. Like I'm back. I actually feel I have the energy to start my own thing. I have the interest to start my own thing. Kind of like that reverse opportunity cost. Like I'm feeling, the lack of fun of not having started my own thing. So I think it's just time to do it. And then I got the call on what that thing was and I agreed and we just did it. But this time around, it's not about, I want to do this because it's a continuation. It's like proof that I as a founder am going to make it. I just think it's an actual need that people currently want, and I could be the one to deliver it because I have the skill set and ideally like the longevity of thinking in order to make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you're both going to end up here at some point in time. You're already there, thankfully. But, Jack, you mentioned, I have a plan B. Like, no, you don't. Like, I'm just here to tell you right now, like, no, you don't. Like, if you do the job for another year, you get bored, money's money. But beyond that, you would lose your mind.
But I think the realization is like, you're not going to die. Your family isn't going to disown you if your current thing doesn't work. So like plan B is more like you have a safety net. You have, if this fails, it's not a bad scenario.
100%.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. I mean, I had the experience, when we shut down the company that like for the first month, it was just terror over like, this was kind of like a good life. I know we're kind of describing it as like insane and hard and like all those things are true, but obviously we all love it also.
Yeah.
And so my immediate thing was like, how fast can I come up with an idea that I can raise money for? And I was in that trap for a solid, 2 months maybe. And that was like my only goal. Cause I was just like, I just want to imagine this never happened. And I'm just going, just writing it and nothing has changed. And I actually like there were some opportunities. Like I think I could have just said yes to some things and who knows what we'd be talking about right now. But I think after, shutting down for me, it was my first company. The thing you learn is like, I don't think I could work for someone else again, at least for any period of time, unless the only reason would be for money. But I was almost scared to raise money for the wrong thing. I don't know if I'm sure you guys have gone through pivots at some point. We did a handful.
So this is a great callback to my experience with the burnout. I'd mentioned before, there was 2 very distinct parts of my burnout. And one of them was obviously like company failed. That sucks. Revenue goes down, metrics go down. You feel shitty, like kind of expected. But the other sneaky one was after shutting down the product, we tried to keep the company going for like another few months, like basically in pivot hell with like not enough runway to justify pivot hell. It wasn't like we had years of time. It was like we had basically 2 months to pull a rabbit out of our ass. And that forced idea making sucked so bad. And it burnt me out more than like the failure of the previous thing. possibly could, because you feel obligated to keep going. You feel like if you've raised money for it, you're not required to force like an idea that you really don't like just for the sake of like getting to revenue that shows your investors that you are like a good steward of the money.
Yeah, you're postponing coming to terms with the thing, and you're doing it. You have 2 months where you feel like the locus of control is yours.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, I'm going to solve this. But you have 2 months, the most amount of stress you possibly could, and a near impossible problem.
Yeah.
That is gnarly.
And I respect the people that can pull out of it. And like we've
sure.
pulled out of similar situations in the past. That's part of why we like got 5 years deep into it. But like there's just a certain point where you don't have the emotional gas for it, or you don't have the ideas. Like if there's a clear idea, go figure it out. Like a big pivot is fine, but pivoting into nothingness is like, you got to be built different for that.
And Karthik, you were saying,
I definitely empathize with what Karthik was saying, what you're saying about like, if you're forcing ideas and it's the wrong idea, then you're just going to be stuck with that thing.
Yeah. And like if you raise, the thing is, I think before you start your first company, then it's like, that's the thing. That's oh my God, I can't believe, I've raised millions of dollars. Who are these people and why did they give this money? And now you get to go do whatever the hell you want and you can hire, etc. And so, but I think once you do that, like, your expectations have changed. It's like that was just a debt obligation I took on my business. That was not, why the hell are we, I was just thinking about that. I've watched Shark Tank forever and I was watching it last night and I think it's amazing. Like, obviously it's great to be inspired. It's great that they're capital allocators. We can get money to do this. But at the same time, if you technically think about it, it's like, yeah, you're giving up part of your company for some money. It's a good thing, but it's not, I don't know. I don't want to say it's not an accomplishment, but like you haven't like gotten users or done the thing. It's just kind of like a thing along the way. But a long way of saying, yeah, I think that was a realization where I kind of stopped that process of just like seeking money because I know I can do that. You know what I mean? Like when there's some idea that now once you've done it once, like you can 100% do it the second time.
Oh yeah, and the money comes so much better the second time. So it's just like once you know the money could come, you actually start caring about, do I want to do this?
Yeah.
Which is a question you don't really ask the first time. You just do it because like you get the stamp of status of like you have been funded.
For sure. So I don't know if this relates to, Erik, you wrote a couple things down that are pretty interesting that I don't know really where they go, but you wrote down young founder mania.
Yeah.
What are you talking about there?
Oh, that was the whole thing I was talking about of like, there's very much a class of young founders who show up to San Francisco, which I would put myself in. And I believe you guys kind of fall into this bucket as well, from what I understand, where it's just like, well, I am a vehicle for which we go to the moon and like everything is about getting the company to generally not like necessarily success with customers, but like success through the traditional VC, like YC style route, where it's just like entirely the status game of grind. Are you going to the AI parties? Are you funded by the cool VCs? And if you're not, like, you're a real piece of shit, is like the way you internalize that, because you see other people doing it and it seems like they're having no problem at it. And it's something that's just deeply burnt me out about being in San Francisco, this whole like all or nothing mentality. And I've always been afraid to like communicate this and talk about it because I don't want to out myself as, ex-founder who like his company died because he's a failure. And now he's just kind of doomer about people who are putting their heart and soul into their work. So like, it's kind of a sensitive topic to talk about, but I like when you truly look at the success numbers of startups, I mean, I'll ask you guys, do you know anyone who is, say, worth 100 million that you met while they were starting their startup?
No, I don't know. Most of the founders I know either haven't made it yet or failed, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think you typically meet people in there. I think this is where you're going. I meet older people who have made it, but it's not the young ones.
You met them after they made it, right?
Exactly. And
the reason you met them is because they've already made it. They're probably an investor or like they're in the scene.
Exactly.
So, and I'm not saying this like to be doomer about outcomes. It's just, I think you always see the people on their rise up, but maybe like the cool, sexy founders who are at the AI parties that got funded by the cool VC, they probably die. And like, you spend enough time in San Francisco and you realize like all the noise, all the people that you seem like they're doing really well. You check back in on them in a few years and like they've shut down their company. And I think there's like VC as a business is incentivized to drive this narrative that like you could go out and become deeply, deeply rich doing startups. And unfortunately, it leads to a lot of cannon fodder, honestly, just like young founders just charging the battlefield and getting destroyed because like they think that's what they're supposed to do. And I'd say all three of us probably fell into that exact category. So I'm not saying don't start startups, but I'm just saying like realize the game you're playing, understand the risks, and don't set yourself up for the very, very likely case of tying your identity to the success of your startup. The success of your startup is such a low chance of probability for reasons outside of your control that like you got to find your worth elsewhere.
And I'll say, especially, I was able to, with my current company, with zero funding, after work, get it further than I did than my last company when I was full-time for a year.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost, and maybe I was just totally incompetent before, but I think there's a lot to be said about you're not even, when you're young and you're doing the 80-hour weeks, you're almost certainly not doing the right things.
Yeah.
And so you are burning yourself out on the wrong problems, on the wrong work, versus I don't know if there is actually a solution. Can you get the wisdom? Can you turn the knowledge into wisdom without doing the 80-hour weeks and going the wrong way? I'm not sure, but I do think it's interesting. And I felt this a lot when I was in that phase. I felt like I was lost the whole time, but I had to show up every day. And all I was doing was digging a hole with no direction. And now, I look back, I learned a lot from all that digging, but I probably didn't have to get as deep in the hole to learn those lessons. Yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah, I think it'd be tough because when you see these people who go to, I mean, obviously a founder is becoming cooler with every next year that passes. And right, it started like not cool, not too long ago. It's just like, okay, like when are you getting a real job? We're far past that now. Now it's like a very cool thing to do. Everyone knows what it is. And so obviously a lot of kids who are unserious are going to try this, and a lot of serious ones are going to try it too. I don't really know where to rest the blame, or even if there is any though. I mean, if you think, now we're at the point where there's kind of like being an influencer, like to be really honest. But it's self-fulfilling because VCs are into that. And maybe we can say it's the shittier ones or the better VCs. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The fact is, if you do kind of behave like an influencer and do all the founder tropes, you probably can get money, or it'll be easier to get money than if you didn't do that for 9 out of 10 people. Of course, your business is incredible. Your business is incredible. And that's what you should be doing.
And I think something that these founders miss as well is like VCs are going off of entirely different fund calculus. Like if a VC invests in you, you may think like I am the next Steve Jobs because like they've given me the stamp of approval. They think I'm going to win. But like VCs are thinking there's ideally higher than a 10% chance that this becomes huge. Therefore, like it pays off our fund. We could take a loss on the 9 other investments and this one pays it off. But you could also very much be in that 9 investment bucket. And it's not like they know this or expect this from the start, but it's not as damaging to a VC if a startup fails as it is to the founders.
I also don't know. Part of me thinks it's getting better. I'm like the biggest SF bull there is. And I think there's I just see tons of young founders building cool shit now. Hopefully we'll see some of them on the show sooner than later. But they're mostly more serious. Like if I think about the random people I would meet or try to meet off Twitter versus, let's call it 8 years ago, 7 years ago. Back then, I'd go to events and be like, oh, you know what? Like, maybe these guys aren't so smart. Like, before I moved to San Francisco, like, there are a bunch of idiots and there are a bunch of smart people. But now I feel like everyone is at least trying to do something more seriously, I would say. Like, as being a founder has become more cool, also, like, the lessons and what to actually do have also spread, and, like, everyone knows what they are. And so, I don't know. That would be my optimistic take. I feel like most of the young kids I see moving to the city, and they're moving here in droves. They're not moving anywhere else.
Yeah.
Seem to be working on serious shit. So maybe it's fine.
I'm very happy to take an optimistic take on this as well.
I'm curious. Before we move on, there's some cool stuff on this list here. We got into some personal stuff earlier. I'm personally curious. Both you guys are married.
Yes.
How has that changed your mental? You have a rock, presumably, that, it's like the worst day ever. It's like, oh, you still have someone who loves you and like makes you feel cool. How's that been?
Well, it's been weird for me because I think as I said before, like one of the reasons that I got into building startups in the first place is my dating life wasn't as good as I had wanted. And I thought like getting some external validation through being rich was like the way to do it. Now I like have a wife and she loves me a lot and I love her a lot. And I don't need that. So like, it's kind of one of the weirder things is finding that source of motivation and like, why am I doing this if not for the power and status that comes with being a founder? So that's been one shift. The other shift as well is just the way I could live my life. And during my first startup, for example, I was living in bunk beds. I was eating basically rice, eggs, and beans as my rations. When funds got super low, I moved to Mexico and just lived there for a couple years, like really scrapping by. And those things are just kind of off the table now that I have someone in my life that I want to promise a level of stability to. And I don't think it's necessarily a detriment either. Some could view it as like, oh, that's, a handicap that I now have. Like I can't do the bunk bed scrappy rations. But I think it's forced me to think at a higher level and acquire the resources that I need to continue operating seriously and continue to provide that level of stability. And Karthik, I would love your take with kids because I'm not there yet. But like this feeling of being responsible for something more than just me has actually increased my drive and increased like the levers I'm willing to pull in order to deliver on that promise I'm making to my family.
Yeah, I mean, I can mainly only speak to having it and really not the opposite, like having a relationship, just because, we're about to celebrate our 10th anniversary this year, and that's marriage. We dated for a long time before that. So it's just kind of in my entire adult life. I think I worked at a movie theater when I was a kid, and that's the only job I guess I've had without being with Maru. So it's kind of hard to give a pre here. But yeah, I mean, what Eric's saying is true. There's someone else around, someone else you're doing this for. I think that's pretty important. I guess the more unique take I can give is, when we got started the first time, it's just good to have someone around. My experience at the first company was I'm going to quit my job. I've worked as a product manager at 3 tiny startups that you've never heard of because they didn't work out, which is totally fine because my company is now that too. But, that's what gave me the balls to actually go start my own company. But I just knew, for me, if I have something, that's why I kind of made the comment of the plan B thing, Jack, before. It's like, if I have something going on, then I'm not going to do the next. I'm like a very single track kind of person. And so I was like, you know what? I just had to quit. Like whatever I'm doing, I'm just quitting. I luckily have a little bit of money here that I saved up. And if I don't quit, I'm not going to start a company. And at least for me, obviously I don't have the counterfactual, but I thought I was a lot more comfortable doing that because like Maru was around, right? It's like, I'm not going to go home now and look in the mirror and be like, or, pointing at you better figure this out. Some people could see that as a reason to be lazy. Oh, you're happy outside of this. But for me, it was like, yeah, okay, I need to start if anything, I'll feel like a loser if I keep, Maru comes back from work and I've just done nothing. I thought it was great. Like, it is really like having a rock around. I think with Mayu now, my son, he's a year and a half, I guess, almost. That has been different because it's been a lot harder to decide how to spend your time. You simply have less of it. And the time I'm spending with him is amazing. It's kind of in a place where I know a lot of people say negative things. For me, I'm so happy now. To take time away to do work or something else is quite challenging. I also, as a technical detail, we have decent money, not enough to retire though, right? So there's no option to do nothing either. Even if, I will be honest, probably the first time ever that sounds somewhat appealing. So that's kind of different. Where like if there was a magic way to win the lottery, I think I'd be happy for a very extended period of time now that Maya's around too. And so now that I go through ideas, I guess it's been that entire time. We shut down the company about a month before Maya was born. So it's been a year and a half thinking what I might do next. This podcast is one of them. There's a couple other things cooking, but I'm really just exploring because it puts such a goddamn high bar on how to spend your time. Because we're not talking about taking a job, right? We're not talking about 40 hours. Like once you go into something, you're single track, we're talking 80, 90, 100-hour weeks, which I'm happy to do, but like it better be the right thing. And so I think that's probably like my current challenge.
That's great. I appreciate that. I'm single. It's interesting because I have a lot going on, which I take for granted. Like because I don't have a relationship, I'm able to work 12 hours a day and then have a rock and roll band and ride mountain bikes and stay up on my fitness. But I can't emphasize enough. Like I get home at the end of the night and it's like, it's so lonely. Like I'm in this, I have a 1 unit or like a 1 bedroom or it's a 2 bedroom. My brother and I bought a place. So he lives downstairs with his girlfriend and I have this like giant apartment and I live alone. And there's no worse reminder. Yeah, penthouse. as you can see behind me, it's not a penthouse. It's a kind of a shithole, but it's in progress. But I come home every night and it's like, it's just sad. Like 9 p.m. rolls around. I'm like still working. It's dark. I have nothing. And I thought, and this is like maybe, part 2, and then we can move on to some other stuff. Like I've gotten so secure with myself that dating is actually, I'm the least successful I've been. And dating has never been easier because I'm so satisfied with who I am. But now it's like finding the right person. And I guess, is this an optimization problem I need to just give up on? Because like, I'm really particular about who I want to marry because, I'm like, okay, I've like come this far. How did you guys think about this problem? Or did you think about this problem? How did you know she was the one? Or was it you spent enough time together and inertia took you here and you found she's fantastic. This would be awesome to spend my life with this person. Is that a crazy question?
No, it's a really good question. I've been pleasantly surprised by the answer to this question. The right person is the person that could be your teammate forever. And it's less about like, have you found the butterflies in your stomach? Like checks every single checkbox person. It's, can you trust them where you come home and you're going to be excited to see them? You're going to be excited to see you. When you have kids, you're going to be excited to have that family together.
Yeah.
You could comfortably resolve all the issues that come up. When there's stresses, you get through them together. It's like, I think it's just, can you trust that person to show up and be that for you? And less about their qualifications, if that makes sense.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's great. Also, Eric, you're getting some sun. Do you want to close your blinds or something?
I would love to, yeah, but I didn't know if I could leave camera.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's like we're an FBI interrogation. It's like a
Way better.
flashlight in your eyes.
Yeah, but like that's the sort of thing that you can really only learn in it, like doing it. It's not the sort of thing you could screen out on a first date. You only see it when an inconvenience comes up and you get through it together as a couple. And I think that's wife material.
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
So I'll say 2 things. One will be a little counter, not really. And then the first one is going to feed your paranoia. I don't know if I should do that or not. So
do it.
People have been sharing these tweets or these charts where basically it's like, time well spent or whatever, right? And there's the chart with your kids where it's like up and then it's gone, right? Because you're never going to spend as much time as when they're actually kids in your house. Like school is the first thing, then college, and they're adults, and you basically don't. It's like a speck basically at that point compared to the rest of the time. Then there's like time with friends, which then I think falls off at like 40 or 30 or 40 or something. But then your wife is just, that's the only one that's constant. Like once 20 or 30, when people are getting married these days, then it's just constant for the rest of your life. And so it's a pretty important decision. That's where I don't want to feed your paranoia, but it is important. But I think the flip side is it for me, and I've gotten a lot of critical feedback on this. People do ask me. I can't give dating advice. I've never dated as an adult. But for marriage, it was, how should I say this? There were very few things for me to understand what it was. One, it was butterflies in your stomach, to be completely honest, because I don't think that is a checklist. That's just like, that's vibes, right? Then would you be comfortable talking to this person for an hour, doing nothing, like just going for a walk where you really enjoy it? And like, do you find them attractive, like / like want to have sex with them? Like maybe that's crazy, but like those are really my 3 things. And that's it. And the pushback I've got on that though, is that we met when we were so young that like, people always talk about like, what about values? What about this? What about that? I think we were young enough that we just became adults together. So I just sidestepped that thing. And I guess that's the hardest one to maybe align on, or that's where the checklist comes from. I'm not sure. So that's why that was never like in my, thinking, just because I was just young enough that it didn't really matter, at least to me.
That's actually this is the most trivial thing you said there is probably the most insightful for me is, and Eric, you said something similar, like, oh, could you go on an hour-long walk with this person? Like, I had never actually considered that in my dating. I'm thinking, okay, does she have the right family? Like, is she attractive? Did she go to a really good school or have a good job or something? It's like, oh, never did I really think, do I like this person? Which is like, it's crazy, but it's like kind of true. Maybe that's intangible and it's an obvious yes, but it's not always actually. Like that's great. I appreciate your answers, fellas.
We could use this as a callback to earlier in the conversation when we were talking about you needing to add, like, when you're around friends where you could just spew whatever is on your mind and just riff and talk. Like that is a really good sign that you're around a good partner, that you're just genuinely you.
I love it, boys. This is good stuff.
Well, yeah, while we're here, I mean, the one thing I will say basically, like, you really just have to be yourself day one. That's what I truly believe. If you are looking for a wife, like, if you're not, then there's a lot of countervailing advice that I can't give you. But if you are, like, it just speeds it up. I don't know. Personally, I wouldn't want to be the person that needs to be softened into my, personality. And some people might be. And so that would be where this advice is terrible. But I wouldn't like someone like that. So, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think just be Jack. Don't say you're going to say something political to them. Just say it. And listen, we're in San Francisco and they might just get up and walk away. I just saved you $60. So
you're saying I should say it on the app beforehand. I should say it in the text before the first date.
Just to be clear, here are my opinions about races.
Hey, I mean, if she can't laugh at that or know it's a joke, maybe.
I love it. Okay. I mean, they're going to end up, all over like whatever girls, I don't know what social media girls use, but I'll be all over that, or I'll be married in a year. I like it. Thank you, boys. All right. How are we doing on time? Eric, do you have we're
I actually
close to
do got to
time.
bounce in a few minutes here. Can we like rapid fire a few of the fun ones?
Okay, we'll do that. All right. Cool. So Eric, you got to head out soon. Let's do some rapid fire. Commodity products. What is this?
Oh man. So previous company, Banana, was serverless GPU product. Basically, you pay for compute time on a GPU. Hard lesson that I learned there. If you're selling a product that your end users don't really care if it's you or someone else, the value they're getting is just like compute time. It's a bad business to be in. Though ironically, I am running another compute business, and like I could talk about why I'm doing things differently with Pig. But once I experienced that, I started seeing it everywhere and really becoming critical about, why is this user using this product? What value are they getting out of it? Are they getting it because it's the most convenient or cheapest means to acquire a commodity? You got to think about what's setting you apart, other than the fact that you're currently the cheapest option, or like you're currently the best marketed option. At a large enough scale, people just kind of move between commodities based off of what basically price or some other metric they're optimizing for.
So then, hot take, are foundation model companies and APIs commodity products? Yes or no?
Yes. Throughout the entire life of Banana, this was something I was very, very strong about. We are not an API company, because I saw too many cases of the moment a new foundation model comes out that outperforms on the benchmarks that you care about, you move to it. It's become increasingly easy. Everyone's generally going around the OpenAI format of like message history, the API format itself, that you literally just repoint a base URL and you're on a new model for the most part. And I've seen that happen too many times, where it's an incredible business to be in, being purveyors of intelligence via API, like best product market fit there is that I've seen in my entire life. People just want that, but it's a hard game because it is a commodity. So you need to have the best commodity, which is why closed source models make so much sense. I know it's not great for the advancement of the overall community, but as a business, if you have the best good and it's objectively the best, you have a brief window of time while that's the case, in order to make money. So like, you might as well go for it.
Yeah, we found the same thing. Gabber was initially an AI voice company, and there were like 4 of them already. And ours was interesting because it was cheaper and we had more SDKs, but everyone's converged on the same thing. So we really had to think, how do we be different? And if the market's big enough, maybe you can build a business there and it's fine. But that you are always going to be paranoid. I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, next, fancy cheese.
I just love
posting
cheese.
About cheese a lot, so tell us.
Yeah. So some backstory. My wife is Mexican. I've been learning a lot about like the Mexican traditions, and one of them is New Year's. You make 12 wishes on New Year's, and you eat 12 grapes. So I was brainstorming my like not my resolutions, your goals, your wishes for the year, 12 wishes. I was brainstorming my wishes, and I was like peering deep into my heart. What do I love? What do I really want to happen? And I'm like, I think one of my wishes is just to have some really good cheese. I just love cheese. It brings so much joy. So this year, 2025, is the year of cheese. I need to find some really, really good cheese, and I'd love your recommendations.
Can you shout one out right now?
Elk Blossom. I forget.
Elk?
Elk. Like the mountain range, the Alps. Elk.
Okay. Elk Blossom.
Phenomenal. I have a album in my phone titled Cheese That Slaps.
Okay, add one to it right now. Okay, it's called Stracchino cheese. I had this when I was in Italy. Basically, they're saying
Stracchino?
Stracchino.
Stracchino.
I
Okay.
don't know how to spell it, but I think you will find it.
I found it, yeah.
The story they told me about this when I was there, maybe bullshit, maybe not, but he said basically this is cheese from like the lazy, slow cow at the back of the herd. So it has like the least muscle, so like it's so soft and so delicious. And he sold me, then he gave me the cheese, and it was fucking amazing. And then later on, I had it at a restaurant here. They said we have a special. It's a blah 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 blah. I heard the word stracchino. I was like, I'll take it. I don't need to know what it's on or how it's cooked. So I'll add that there. Okay, next one is exercise, running, lifting. I mean, you've clearly been working out more. So tell us.
Yes. I think you lift for the body and run for the mind. Running for me is a meditation thing. It's also my chance to prove myself that I could do bigger and better things. Like I said, like I really got my start in founding once I proved to myself that I could run a marathon. That led into a career now running ultra marathons. I finished my first 50 miler a few months ago.
Nice.
Really proud of that. And I told myself 50 miles is probably where I'll cap off. But now that I have it behind me, I think I need to go for the 100. We'll see.
Nice.
We'll see.
You have to. You said it out loud.
But the weird thing is like, it doesn't do anything for my body. I can be pretty soft physically and like still make it through an ultra, which is not really what you expect. I get that from the gym, like just lifting heavy weights, big compound lifts 3 to 4 times a week, interwoven with my running. That's the ultimate program. So I get in the gym for the body, and then for my mind, I go out and punish myself on the runs.
For sure. No, yeah, I'm a lifting maxi. I mean, I think it does both. I think I lift for the body and I also lift for the mind. I desperately need some cardio as I get older, though. I haven't found something I like. If you have any suggestions other than running, let me know.
Well, I run the type of distances where it's not about liking it. So I don't have any recommendations for you.
Okay, no worries.
I like bike. I think I'm really
Biking
into
is pretty
lifting. I've
sick.
been lifting probably 15 years. And now I've fully done my whole genetic potential. Like I do not make gains anymore. I just go there to not lose anything and for the mental. Bikes, dude. Bikes, I think, like I got into running for a little bit. I did like a half marathon. That was cool. But bikes, man, I don't know what it is. Spending 3 or 4 hours, you can go 50 miles if you're on the road, or you can go mountain biking and do the downhills. That's hard to beat. I don't think I'll ever stop.
All right, last one on the list. Oh no, go ahead.
I've done biking a bit. I had a triathlon season once. How does your gooch handle it? Like, it's just not. It's hard to enjoy a sport where I come out of it with a bruised gooch.
I can't make this joke.
Yeah, you can.
You get used to it. You get used to it. I was gonna say no. I actually can't. Man, this is a bad one. Okay, chamois and reps. I'll say I think I just have a callous gooch at this point.
Yeah.
Do you think there's I'm not gonna let you get out of it. Is there a physical adaptation or a mental one? Like, do you just get over a pain or whatever, or do you think your body changes? I could believe both.
I think there's a hair issue. I think the first couple of times you're probably ripping hair out. That's probably why it hurts so much. Okay. Once that's done, maybe there's some callus action, and then I think you get used to it. To the point with the Chicago, you get used to it being in pain. You don't get it. The pain doesn't go away. You just get used to the pain.
Yeah, you just accept that it's part of it, and it stops being a big obstacle.
Exactly.
All right, last one on the list. You didn't write this, so I have something to help you out if you don't have it. But any of these massive amount of executive orders that were signed strike your fancy, help you or the company or anything else? Have a strong opinion on any of it?
So I launched this last week, so I haven't been paying any attention. Though I heard vaguely through the grapevine that is the Gulf of America. Is that part of the executive orders, or is that just an adjacent thing?
There is a statement made that we will call it Gulf of America, correct?
That's fucking dumb. That's completely useless. Also, my wife is Mexican, so I'm like pretty pro Mexico. That place is sick. We don't need to change something that's good. It's fine. It's inconsequential. Why are we doing this? This is like weird nationalism.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm with you at least in the fact that it is a waste of time. I'm for less government, not more. But I will say, okay, here's one that you might have a take on that I'll throw you a bone. So there's an executive order basically on return to work for government employees. So about half of government employees either have hybrid or fully remote. The executive order is like, this is done. Like, you have 30 days to figure out how to get everyone back in the office. You can make some exceptions, but not many. What do you think about that?
I love it. It's incredibly based. All of Banana was fully remote. It sucked. All of Pig will be fully in person, no exceptions. I just
All right.
like just got to do it. I'm sorry, it's not convenient, but it leads to better work.
Amazing.
At this moment, I'm going to interject here because I have an opinion.
Please.
I think I was, okay, so there's on my street, someone moved out and they left the couch just sitting on the sidewalk. And that couch now has a homeless person sleeping in it. And I think that person that left the couch there thought the world just would clean up the couch, that it would just disappear and they wouldn't have to think about it. And I think that that's pervasive throughout America. People think the system just works. The default state is working. The default state is not chaos to them. And so to the point of this executive order, I feel the same way. I think people think that remote work's fine because things still get done, but they don't realize that the things just get done by fewer people who are more productive. So that's my maybe base take. I think a lot of people are on autopilot and they think the world just happens, and it happens to them, and it sucks. I'm getting rid of it, and it's awesome.
I mean, the one thing I'll leave here before you wrap is basically like, I'm curious if you guys think it's one of two things. One is that it is just, this is a better way to work. We'll get more done. It's worth it. Or is this just a way to fire bottom performers? Because we saw that in tech. I mean, that went straight across tech. It was like, you know what? Like, we don't know how to fire these people. If we just say remote work is over, there'll be some collateral damage. And by the way, we will carve those people out. And so it's kind of a signal like, this is just an easy way to let people go who are not performing. Maybe it's both. I don't know.
I think it's more accountability based. I think there can be high performers who are remote.
Oh, for sure.
But I think teams work better in person. And I think more seriously, or more importantly, there are people exploiting the system, and they can't exploit it if they have to go into work every day. Probably, hopefully.
All right. Well, Erik, it was great having you. A bunch of different, I'll describe our audience. I mean, it's just our Twitter followers. So it's founder type people, some VCs, and a lot
probably
of
follow each other. Yeah.
And a lot of degenerate crypto traders, at least coming from my side. Actually, Jack worked in that space, so definitely he's got a ton too.
Yeah.
So if
Can you
there's
tell
anything,
them to stop making meme coins about Pig?
I can't do that. That is not possible.
Somebody
you
like
gotta embrace it.
There's like 8 on our launch day. Like a bunch of them launched and like tried to be like serenade or masquerade as Pig. I'm getting messages all the time like, "Hey, like, what do you need to do about this?" I'm like, "Fucking nothing. I don't want this."
I'm gonna buy, baby. Buy low, sell high.
Yeah. This is financial advice by Jack. Make sure.
Yep. Buy Pigcoin. None of them are me.
Do not buy Pigcoin. Okay, sorry. I just wanted to look it up. Okay, they're pretty small. Like the Pigcoins I'm seeing, okay, we got like a 3K market cap. So nothing too, wait, Pig by Steve. I mean,
They're not huge cap. Like it's causing bots in my DMs, and I don't like it.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, no, it's dangerous. No, there are a couple. There's one that's 9 mil, one that's 8.8 mil, and one that's 111K. The 111K is since you've announced, I think. So that's probably more a scammer. And the other ones are people who like the name Pig. But anyways, the reason I brought all that up is like, that's the kind of audience. Anything you would want these people to do, where can they check out Pig? What should they do?
What I want you to do is think of your startup friends who are building some back office automations for, some niche space, usually healthcare, like manufacturing, these sorts of work. You probably know someone working in this space. While you as a listener, you're probably just playing around with AI. I would love to be connected with the people who are like actually like have a very specific weird niche thing that they're automating. Get them in touch with me, Erik@banana.dev, Erik with a K.
Banana?
Oh my gosh, I keep doing it. Yeah. That email will route to me as well. Erik@Pig.dev.
Okay, amazing. All right, it's great having you on, Erik.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah, see ya.